the complete guide to mastering riffs, runs and ad-libs. Well guys, the fact that you're here deserves a huge welcome and well done. Now when it comes to riffs, runs and ad-libs, I know that these can be very intimidating vocal techniques, but honestly, they need not be. In this course, I'm going to really break it down. Essentially, when you're speaking about riffs, runs and ad-libs, we're essentially speaking about when a singer makes an audibly pleasing variation in the melody of the song. Now, what's a melody? Well, it's a sequence of single notes that is musically satisfying. Let's take the song, for example, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. The melody of this song goes like this. There we have it. And we all know it. A sequence of single notes that makes a musically pleasing or satisfying piece. Now, the first thing I want to help you on is providing clarity on what the difference is between riffs, runs, and ad-libs. Now, I know it can be kind of confusing because there are so many different words that many people essentially use to describe the same thing. For example, riffs, runs, ad-libs, licks, turns, and trills. But when speaking about riffs, runs and ad-libs, they are slightly different. We have over here Riffy Riffington, a humble and sweet soul.
Now bear with me on this one guys, it will make sense. Riffy Riffington. Now I want you to use this caricature as an example of what a riff would be. A riff, like Riffy, is quite reserved and humble in its approach, especially when taking into account alongside a run.
And on the other hand, we have MC Run. This time. Okay, what I did there. Now, as you can tell by his attire, he's a little bit more extra.
An extra indeed he is. Now extra, guys, if you don't know what that means, is just an abbreviation for saying extroverted. Okay, so MC Run This Town. Again, this is basically a caricature that I want you to see as a visual example of what a run would be. As seen in his attire, he's a bit more extroverted and has a lot more of a featured presence in his approach.
And then finally, we have Reverend Professor Adlib, a little more studious in his approach.
And like any professor, Reverend Professor Adlib likes to pay attention to words as well as melodies. Now his approach can be seen as a little bit more complex, but to be honest, I'll break that down as well. He focuses on words as well as melodies and uses a combination of a riff approach as well as a run approach. Stick with it guys, this will all make sense. But in the meantime,
Riffy Riffington, MC Run This Town, and of course the Reverend Professor Adlib. Now stay with me, this will make sense. Do you remember what melody is? Okay, a sequence of notes that make a musically pleasing or satisfying piece. A melody. If we were to look at Riffy Riffington's approach to this melody, we would see that a riff modestly complements or accents a melody. For example, dun.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are.
Dun, 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 dun. See what a riff is? A riff is a complement or an accent to a word, phrase or note, a bit more humble in its approach, especially when taken into account alongside a run. Now let's see what MC Run This Town's approach would be to this very simple melody of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Check this out.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are.
Did you hear that? So, taking this approach and this example into account, we can decipher that a run is a longer, probably more of a featured piece in a melody, and naturally a little bit more extra in its approach. Okay, so thus far we can tell that a riff is a little bit more of a complement or an accent to a phrase or melody, and a run is a little bit more of a longer, more of a feature piece within the melody. Let's now look at the approach of Reverend Professor Adlib, and let's see if this helps us further understand what an adlib is in comparison to a run or a riff. Now, an adlib has more of an emphasis or a concentration or a reinforcement on the words of the melody rather than the notes themselves. Now, this is a very popular technique when we're speaking about genres such as gospel, pop.
Now I'm going to attempt to do an adlib on Twinkle Twinkle Little Star.
Notice how the singer ad-libs within the words of the song to emphasize its meaning and its impact.
Twinkle, twinkle, little how I wonder, when I look out my window, little star, I just wonder what you are. And as you can see in my example there, I'm really focusing on the words and the lyrics of the song as well as the notes to reinforce and emphasize its meaning and what it means to me as a singer. How I wonder what you are when I look outside my window, how I wonder what you are. So an ad-lib will take the notes as well as the words into account when singing.
Okay, so now we can see the difference between riffs, runs and ad-libs. Riffs are a bit more sweet and humble in their approach, typically complementing or accenting a word within a phrase or a melody. And a run is a bit more of a longer feature piece, a bit more extra in its approach, but really is the showpiece of a melody. And an ad-lib pretty much combined both a riff and runs approach, but there's more of an emphasis and a concentration on the reinforcement on the words that are being sung rather than just the notes themselves. Okay, so before we get into the practical stuff, I need you guys to understand the myths surrounding riffs, runs and ad-libs. And once you understand this, I know it's going to give you the confidence that you need to approach these exercises, knowing that you too can master these vocal techniques. All right, so let's debunk some of these diabolical myths that have surrounded riffs, runs and ad-libs. And finally, let's lay them to rest. Myth number 1. Riffs and runs have to be fast. Oh, yeah. Well, who said? Let's have an example of a riff and run that's fast, but also a riff and run that is slow. A fast one.
Oh, yeah.
And one that's a bit more slow in its approach. Both of them have their parts to play depending on the song and the emotion being sung. They need not be fast or need not only be slow. They literally just need to be a skillful expression of your interpretation of the melody. Let's debunk another myth. Now, this is something that I was told. You don't need to have a perfect vibrato. Just riff and run over it instead. I remember being told by a singing teacher that I used to have that I don't need to perfect my vibrato because I have the ability to riff and run. Now, this is just not true. This is the reason why I did not perfect my vibrato for many years. Now, I want you guys to refer to my course on perfecting your vibrato if this is something that you really do struggle with. But long story short, the vibrato is simply an oscillation in the tone that you sing. It sounds a bit like this. I'd encourage you that to perfect your vibrato is also another great way to even perfect your riffs, runs and ad-libs. Why? Well, because it further allows you as a singer to have ultimate control over your vocal approach and your vocal ability. Okay, another myth. If you can't sing a sustained note, just riff or run over it. Again, a complete fabrication of what is right for you as a singer. I want you guys to refer to my Essential Diaphragm and Breathing course, which teaches you how to sustain a note for a longer period of time without feeling like you're about to run out of breath. Now, if you want to sustain a note, go for it. But don't avoid this by riffing and running over it. Again, I'm all for vocal control. So whether you decide to sustain a note like this, or you decide to riff and run over it like this, Make sure this is dictated by the fact that you just wish to express yourself in a certain way, not down to the fact that you've not gained control over your voice, so are therefore trying to use quick and cheap tricks to avoid you doing the work to gain ultimate vocal control. And the final myth I want to debunk is the one that surrounds the idea that you are born with the ability to riff, run, or ad-lib, or that it's only for people who are very gifted or filled with the Holy Ghost. Not necessarily true. Everything, and I repeat, everything regarding your voice can be mastered with practice and correct guidance. Riffs, runs, and ad-libs are not the reserve of the super talented, but the reserve of those who are determined and willing to make the very best of their voice and gain ultimate vocal control. The fact that you're doing this course tells me that this is you. So let's put away with all the myths and finally get down to the nitty-gritty of mastering riffs, runs, and ad-libs. The final thing I want to leave you guys with is riffs, runs, and ad-libs can either be rehearsed or they can be improvised. If you're at the stage where you cannot yet improvise, riff and run and ad-lib, fret not. Honestly, don't worry about it. I've been there. There is zero harm in learning and rehearsing riffs and runs first. In this much anticipated course, I'm going to teach you 3 major things surrounding riffs, runs, and ad-libs. Firstly, how to master them by first increasing and enhancing your vocal agility. That is your vocal flexibility. Secondly, we're going to build up your riff, run, and ad-lib vocabulary. Now stay with me on this because it will all make sense as we go along. Notes, chord progressions, chord sequences, note sequences, these are pretty much the basis from which you can build your riffs and runs vocabulary. So we're going to look at things like pentatonic scales and different note progressions and scales that can help you master and deliver riffs and runs. And finally, we will start to master these riffs and runs with certain songs, giving you the confidence, not just to rehearse riffs and runs, no, but also have the confidence to spontaneously improvise them whenever you sing any particular song. Okay, so you ready? Awesome, me too. Let's go. Finally, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty on how to master riffs, runs, and ad-libs. Let's go, guys. Good luck.